Okay. I want to welcome everybody to my little broadcast here. This is Steve Brodner, welcoming Jack Ohman from across the entire United States to my little situation here on Substack. And he's got a situation on Substack also, which we will discuss. Jack's one of my favorite artists, one of my favorite people. And it's an honor to have him here because Jack really understands what it is to take ideas and make them visual, to make them tangible and visceral and real for the brain and the heart. This is a skill that does take some doing. It doesn't just, it doesn't fall out of your pencil. It is the result of many years of uh, uh, being influenced by others and also doing shitty work yourself.
Decades.
And decades of shitty work. And
Yeah.
I do think
All
that that's,
pays off.
as I say to my kids, that's like the best thing that can happen is shitty work coming out of your pencil.
Mhm.
And embrace the crap. We will see no crap today. We're going to be looking at Jack, in my opinion, at the top of his form. This is I'm going to what I love about doing this is that we can talk, but unlike other podcasts, we don't you don't have to just look at us. You could look at the really genius work that Jack does. I'm gonna give you a brief bio. His bio goes on because he is highly accomplished. He is, for the record, an American editorial cartoonist, writer, educator, author, currently contributing opinion columnist and cartoonist for San Francisco Chronicle. Prior to that, he worked in a number of places. Detroit Free Press in the beginning as a baby, the Oregonian, Sacramento Bee for a long time, and in '86, uh, through sales of copies of his cartoons about the Challenger accident, Jack raised over $30,000 for the families of the astronauts. This is the power of cartoon and the power of connecting your talent with your generous character. Not everybody is able to figure out how to do it and then actually do it. This was the fifth largest private donation in the U.S. to this cause. In 2001, he raised over 30,000 for the United Way September 11th Fund. This is what they call in French a mensch. Uh, it's,
That's not French, incidentally.
it's not French.
No.
I've been wrong. I've been living in New York too long, Jack.
Yeah.
His work appears in most major newspapers, including the Times, Chicago Trib, Washington, the former Washington Post, the late
Not
Washington,
anymore.
not anymore.
Nobody runs in the Post
Good to
anymore.
have these things, but regular contributor for a good long time. Also, he is a noted fisherman and has turned that into books that he's authored. He's done four such books: Fear of Fly Fishing, Get the Net, An Inconvenient Trout, and Angler Management. Um, again, to my students, find the thing you love, identify the thing you love, and go there with your art. You will find people who also love it. Awards, too many. I have a big list of awards. Let us say that he is a Robert F. Kennedy Award winner, not Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Sr.,
I
journalism.
have to make that differentiation for people now.
It's,
Remember,
it's,
Dad was.
it's getting very complicated out there. Um, Society Professional Journalists Award, Scripps Howard, Pulitzer Prize finalist in 2012, and in 2016 he won it on the day. Actually, we're recording this on the day when Ann Tilness won her second one. There,
I'm
there's there,
sorry. I
there's
just keep it right here
the
just in case
Pulitzer.
they need to.
Ladies and gentlemen, he keeps it in his pocket, and
It,
when he meets people, he pulls it out. They think
it's a
he
wallet size
it's wallet
laminate.
size. Uh, he has been voted the best this and that by everyone. all over the place. And I'll stop there because we just don't we have a limited amount of time. And you all know Jack, and I perhaps some of you are seeing him and meeting him for the first time, and it's fantastic to have you here. Welcome, Jack.
Thanks so much, friend.
We are going to go sharing now this collection that I have on my um, Photoshop file. It's not actually the cool way to do it, but I think you can get a big view of the work this way. Um, and let me see how I can organize it a little bit. Okay, good, cool. Um, so what I'd like to do, Jack, is to get your opinion about your work and about what you're doing generally by just going through specific ones and talking about what I love about them. And then you can tell me what you think is interesting or uh, unexpected about anything. Um, I just want to start by saying that this is an example of something Jack does that really nobody else does. He is a maximalist. And when you are putting narrative together in a composition, if you have too much stuff, you're going to confuse the viewer. Now, this picture here is showing Trump the bad neighbor. He's moved into the White House and he has done, as he would say, a number on the neighborhood. He's got now in this, first of all, Jack, generally in a publication, how big would this run? How many inches?
Oh, golly, I don't know. What is 5, 6 inches,
Five,
maybe?
okay, in 5 inches, you are running a terrible risk of clutter and overcrowding. So the most important thing that happens here is not the ideas, in my opinion, is organizing what you have. If you can't get the organization right, you've lost the whole show. So there's got to be room for the caption. So he gives us maybe a fifth of the page for the caption. There has to be room for the White House. And then all the little things that are happening. We need to see the angry vines in the yard. We need to see Trump with his AR-15. We need to see COVID. We need to see the perturbed neighbors. Um, and I don't know how you do it. There are things that just baffle me in terms of your ability to achieve uh, this this amazing goal. It's one thing to want to do it, and it's another thing, quite another thing, to get it all done. Can you give me a sense of how much prep you have to do in order to have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10, maybe 11, 12 elements that need to be clear and clear in the way you want us for us to see it in the order that you want. Can you tell me a little bit about what you go through in order to achieve this?
You know, I've done probably 13, 14,000 political cartoons in my career. I started in 1978 when I was 17 years old. And I have no formal art training. I've never taken a college level art class. I did speak to your class once, which was a great honor. Um,
For us,
you know, I just really think a lot of the time these things are just practice, but they're also something else, which is I lost my fear of drawing quite a long time ago. I would say about 20, 25 years ago. And I think people can get these types of ideas, but they think, well, this is going to take forever, or how am I going to do the composition, or how am I going to make this clear in the little space that a newspaper or the internet affords me. And so I kind of lost my inhibition. And so not being a formally trained artist, I mean, I've studied illustration for decades, like anybody should. And that's a but I remember there was a book that I had when I was a kid, called Where's Wallace? Not Where's Waldo, but Where's Wallace? And you may be familiar with Hilary Knight. And I
Yeah.
think Hilary Knight might still be alive, and he's very close to 100. And in fact, Hilary Knight illustrated my stepmother's book, who was Peg Bracken, the cookbook author back in the day, who was huge, in 1960.
He hates to cook.
Right. It was you remember it was a very she was the spokesperson for Birdseye,
Right.
and that isn't that if that isn't a Stephen Jack joke, I don't know what. For 6 years. So anyway, Hilary Knight did these amazing big drawings that were double truck in this book, and where's Wallace was you were trying to find the little orangutan in the drawing. And so this was a book that I basically became obsessed with. And later generations of kids would have, Richard Scarry books, where you had a billion different things going on. And Richard Scarry was very good at, doing those huge scenes. And so when I started in cartooning, first of all, I was like, wow, did you have to call it Where's Waldo? Couldn't you have changed the name?
Yeah, right.
Um, and that guy made 82 million billion dollars. But I loved those big screens and big scenes, So, cartooning is so intuitive. And you have to really loosen your wing nut, in the words of a cartoonist I like a lot, Frank Camuso. And once that wing nut is loose, boy, what I would tell any art student is this is all about the pencil rough. Don't think about the final. Think about the pencil rough. Don't I see a lot of cartoonists do very rough roughs. I do really detailed roughs so that I've got it all laid out. I don't, in fact, I just happen to have my cartoon for tomorrow here, but you don't get don't be afraid of your final, but really make sure if you want to do something like this, the rough's got to be dead on. So you're almost tracing at that point. So
Hmm.
you work out the compositional problems in the rough and not in the final.
Hmm.
So this is what I did for tomorrow, or I'm about to do. And so note that it's a pretty finished looking drawing. And if I did this in a pencil, I could probably get this done in 45 minutes. And so I think that lack of inhibition has helped me do those larger scale drawings.
Did you make smaller thumbnails before you got to that?
This,
Yeah.
I don't have thumbnails on it yet because at least I know how I'm going to do a thumbnail,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Um, but it's more like I was really careful about the facial expression and the positioning of the hands, and also, the trouble with where I'm at now in my career is that I've got to turn out a hell of a lot of material every week.
Hmm.
I'm minimum 6 and usually 8 drawings a week. And then I write a column for the Chronicle, which is, this is not a humor column. This is a political opinion column.
Hmm.
Um, and then I write a couple columns for my Substack. So like I have a real active senior lifestyle, you know, and
The only way to travel, I think.
yeah, but I mean, you have to give each drawing. It's almost like golf, and I hate to make a golf analogy, but like you just think about it shot to shot. You don't think about, gee, can I shoot 40,
Right.
or 80? Just worry about your swing.
This
And
is
so,
life. This is very good life advice anyway. All we are doing is the thing right now. And if you're worried about, what it's going to amount to, it will it may not amount to the thing that you're looking at, and you'll be crushed. You'll be very disappointed. And
another Can I just say one more thing about that particular drawing? And I apologize. You and I are just used to talking over each other constantly.
That's
So
okay. I'm going to go back to it. Hold on.
lettering is everything in cartooning. It's just everything in the way that I do it.
Hmm.
And my dear mother, who died at 56, was an art student in the 1940s and 50s. And, buddy, she sat me down with lettering books when I was 6 years old. And I thought, like, I have I think the other thing I've got that, something God gave me, or Yahweh or whoever, um, I have the ability to draw really small stuff.
Oh, we were going to go into that.
Okay. And
Uh,
so that is kind of my superpower with this kind of drawing. Like I could draw you a picture of Abraham Lincoln that was the size of a pencil eraser.
yeah,
And like how it's just like a parlor trick. Wes Terrell in Canada is really good at that too. And I will sometimes put, if you look at these figures, I mean, Trump is probably the size of a quarter, you know,
I'm not
and
getting a lot of resolution on this, but
yeah, but I'm
but
just
still,
saying,
you could see that you have made a lot of editorial decisions on what can read from a distance and still have it be Trump. But you do this consistently. I've told you this before. You are a master at this, and you are in your small drawings, the small caricatures. You are as accomplished as anybody doing larger. You can just blow these things up, and somebody will see. Well, he's got three dots there, and how did he achieve that? And that is the result of uh, extreme editing in the mind and tremendous control. Um, and it's remarkable. The way you draw the architecture of the building is remarkable. The expressions on the faces of the women have to be just right. There's a chicken in here that uh, I is there for some reason, but I don't think you need a reason for a chicken. I think it's
no,
always good to
absolutely.
have chicken in your illustration. But the thing is, look at how I say my viewers, look at how he makes the space for the chicken. Nothing is crashing into it. Same thing with the pig. Same thing with the COVID virus. Same thing with this. All these things, this is what we can call, generally speaking, design. This is good, strong design. But in the case of a cartoon, unless the eye of the viewer is going first, second, and third in the order you want, your narrative gets lost. So this is the thing that, if I weren't teaching, I would not realize how hard it is to study this and learn it. My kids they get there, but boy, and I'll tell you something else about this. And we're going to see these things. I'm not going to have to mention this every single time, but we see this consistently over and over again. Uh, you have rhythms in your colors. You are working with reds and green and yellow. Yellow has a rhythm here. It connects here, here, and here. Red starts here, perhaps. It has a connection here, here, and here. Green here and here. And wow, it is so damned intelligent. I'm
Thank you.
moving. I'm moving on to the next one. Okay,
Can I just talk
these are
about
not in
red?
order, Jack. These are
Yeah,
just
yeah, that's
pictures
fine.
I like. Go
Yeah.
ahead. What are you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say I heard a lecture by Peter Cooper a couple of years ago, who I think is amazing.
I've met him.
Yeah, you have met him. And Peter Cooper is not my friend or anything. I mean, we're acquainted with each other, but like he gave a talk on color theory, and I was just like, he's a master. He's just I don't know. It's intuitive, and yet you have to study it.
He's
And
he's been at it as long as we have,
yeah,
and he's
yeah,
he's learned all these things. Let's move on. Let's get as many. I want to. get as many pictures in the hour as we can. Uh, Here is kind of an ordinary scene, right? We don't get the joke for a second and a half. This is a technique that I call um, finding the punchline. It is a technique always employed by Charles Adams. Every Charles Adams cartoon you see is funny only after a second. The first thing you see is something ordinary, and then, oh, bang, ha, that's funny. Okay? So this part here, where you take 2020 and turn it into 220,000 deaths, comes a little bit later. This pops first. Then we see the guy, and then we see where he lives. And then you're saying, well, what's going on? And then, okay. It's about a second later, maybe second and a half. I think it's genius. I think it's brilliant. To make the joke, you laugh more when your brain has to put something together and really gets the punchline, and it's not served to you immediately, right? It's like a one-liner joke that is not quite obvious till you think about it.
I think, yeah, to that point, I've always thought of myself as a writer who could draw rather than being an artist who can write. And I think there's a big difference. And I was just talking to my wife about this. When I was a kid, um, like 15, when I got really into politics, I can go into that in a little bit more detail in a bit, but I watched a lot of the political shows back when they were fun and interesting. And I watched Washington Week in Review, and I watched Meet the Press and Face the Nation. And I mean, there was no DEI on these programs. You know what I mean? It was just like a
Old
six
white men, yeah.
guys our age, wearing suits, and
Lawrence Spivak,
Lawrence Spivak and Dave Broder, and oh God, Peter Lisagor and all these old dudes,
Peter Lisagor, yeah, yeah.
and I wanted to be one of those guys. And like late in my career, I became a political columnist, or, political opinion columnist, which seems crazy to me. But so I came into cartooning kind of through the political thing rather than a guy in art school, and yeah, I was kind of the guy who could draw, but there were many kids in my high school class who drew way better than and painted way better than I did.
To be a good illustrator, to be a good cartoonist, you have to have this other ability, this ability to take what is sense on a written page, and then, or in your case, in the case of a cartoonist, the written page is in your mind. It's not something that's given to you. You're writing the thing out either physically or it's happening in your mind. And then you are interpreting it visually for some stranger, someone you never are gonna meet, to pick up the paper or look at the cell phone and say, wow, that nails it. That's funny. And it's funny, or they appreciate it because it tells the truth, because there's a way of getting at the truth that they haven't seen yet before. So yeah, uh, your your ideas come from writing, but they are then turned into something visually very powerful, which is the reason that those of us who do this get hired, because writers can't do it. They wish they could, but they can't.
Yeah, right. And I mean, intriguingly, in American journalism, uh, we're not valued really, comparatively speaking. I've had more than one conversation with an editor over the years where, they found out I was a columnist or something, or wrote book reviews and say, "Oh, you can write?"
Right.
And it's like, "No, buddy, I can turn one of these things around in 2 hours in color. That's my superpower." But like, you just think, "Oh, you just bang that out. You just toss it off," And they're very, a lot of editors are very dismissive of what we do.
Well, they can't stand it.
Well, they don't do it.
It's a
Do.
thing that perplexes them. They don't know why they need to have somebody else do it when it seems like they should be able. And that's the allure of AI, by the way. I think that a lot of people are going to love AI because they can produce something by pushing a button that is way inferior, but satisfies this resentment that they feel.
And frequently has eight fingers on the right hand.
They'll fix that, but I don't think they care about it at all.
Hmm.
This though combines, so a lot of the things that we're going to look at are combinations of things. When it turns out that Donald Trump's biggest supporter, or one of them, was the My Pillow guy, uh, in nobody's mind except Jack Ohman does it occur that a pillow is a very close relative to the construction of the Ku Klux Klan uniform, which traditionally is bed sheets sewn together in a bizarre and deeply disturbing design. There's uh, this is eloquence. This is simplicity plus intelligence equaling eloquence. And, bang, it's right there. Um, I think an idea is two things that exist separately, or more, two or more things that exist separately that now get fused together. They don't belong together, but suddenly they do, and it makes total sense, but only makes sense after you've done it, because most people wouldn't have thought of it in the first place. Um, this is a different kind of a cartoon. This is where you just played with scale. Uh, Chuck Schumer, like most politicians that I've noticed, is over 6 feet tall. When you see him standing with the other politicians, they're all sort of the same height, except for Elizabeth Warren, who's shorter, or if you should see Michael Dukakis. Uh, Someone is calling me, and they shouldn't be calling me. Anyway,
They're
um,
calling Michael Dukakis.
it might be Michael Dukakis calling me to complain.
Will you give them good jobs with good wages?
Yes, and all the nail polish remover you can take. Anyway, this is this is Chuck
Too
Schumer.
soon?
We
Yeah.
we don't have to go into all that. This is Chuck Schumer giving us presenting Senator Booker, who has now become a massive force in the Democratic Party. You don't need to tell anybody what's happening. You just have to show the scale. And you're trusting that your viewer, that your reader, understands that what just happened is a kind of a reordering of power in the United States Senate, where Schumer, through a series of events, which would include Cory Booker's amazing 25-hour speech, has diminished the Democratic leadership. But what I just said would take a couple of paragraphs, but no, boom, it's just by playing with the scale, we get it right here.
You mentioned Schumer's height. I'd always, I'm not sure he is 6 feet tall. I was thinking he might be a little smaller than that, but he's now quite hunched over,
He's
right?
yes, he's
Uh,
he looks like he's about to topple.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so I guess what I would say to any student was that, oh, d- tie knots are different. Look at the tie knots. Look at the way the collar looks. Look at their posture. Those are all the little tells in cartooning, in caricature, where, look at the small stuff first, really. Anybody can do, the bald guy with the glasses or whatever. But you have to see those nuances in somebody's everything, their whole composure.
Uh,
And so with Schumer, I was very careful to make him a little hunched over.
yeah. Yeah, and a disheveled suit, a suit that looks like he slept in it. And he's kind of a disheveled guy. And
Shambling is, I think, the
yes,
word. Yeah.
shambling and um uh, kind of a mess with the glasses hanging off the end of his nose. And, he looks like what he is, which is a great gift to caricaturists anyway. We're always hoping to draw someone who looks like just like what they are. So it's just easier to use them as a symbol. Um, okay. Uh, this is a real example of that thing we talked about, that your micro caricature ability. Peter Navarro and Musk. What are we going to emphasize about Musk? You know, especially if he's got a hat on. I like to go with the upper part of his head, which does kind of look like Frankenstein's monster. And he's got hair that kind of flings out. But when he's got the hat on, what are you going to do? You've noticed that he has a very pronounced, almost scarified um, cheek smile muscle that's sort of there even when he's not smiling. And when he is smiling, the upper lip curls down for some reason. Now he's got these real strong jawbones, some of which I think are the result of surgical implants,
Hmm.
because his earlier pictures don't show any of this. Uh,
Yeah.
but here are just a couple of decisions, and boom, we have it. We know it's Musk. Navarro is kind of your standard issue cranky old man with a long nose. And you didn't give us a lot of wrinkles, but you gave us five or six. That's enough. We got it. Uh, Old man ear, big pot belly. But of course, you didn't want us to miss the point because he's not a big celebrity. My
No.
my wife wouldn't know him if she saw him in person. Uh, and then the idea of the tariffs being a part of the reason for the implosion of Wall Street, and the old trope about 1929 suicides, people standing on the ledge. It, it's all here. But I just want to point out the um, area of the picture that is occupied by the faces. It's almost microscopic, and yet it's a huge part of the storytelling.
I mean, I know this is a trope, and that's okay. I mean, what I tell my colleagues is, if you're going to do a trope, do it a little differently than everybody else,
Yeah.
you know, because we do have to, from time to time, engage in this sort of stuff. And I try to avoid it. But in this case, sometimes you'll bang out a rough. And to me, this is interesting. I wish can see where some of the other roughs were on this drawing. I had originally drawn that, um, somebody on a ledge, and I think it was Musk jumping off the ledge, and because his stock price had gone down. And then, when you do roughs on the weekend, sometimes the news will change, and so, all of a sudden Navarro and Musk are having a feud. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll change Musk dropping because of the stock prices of Tesla, and go to this approach. And one thing I would tell anybody is if you can figure out a way to draw in perspective, if you got the time, we see one cartoon after another that's very flat, somebody from the waist up kind of thing. And I mean, a lot of that's time crunch, or it doesn't really matter whether, you've got a good 3D perspective on it. But I think in this case, if this had been drawn flat, I don't know that it would work as well.
Hmm.
And so I'm always, again, not a trained artist, but I thought, well, I'm gonna I'm going to work with an up perspective, which is probably the most difficult
You
one.
are you are a trained artist, Jack. I'm sorry to contradict you, but the training came from doing thousands and thousands of pictures, and you are as trained as anyone. But you're trained in the direction of achieving your specific goals as an artist, and
And I appreciate that.
you're
I almost gave you 550 for your drawing class. But there's something else in this thing that it's kind of an inside thing. But uh, this that he had written, that Navarro had written a book and cited a person, an economist named Ron Vera,
who
who doesn't exist.
doesn't exist, right? He's a
It's
non,
an anagram of Navarro.
but he needed to quote somebody, so he invented someone.
Well, people, in journalism lose their jobs for doing that.
Of course.
And so, okay, well, you just written a book on economics and you're quoting yourself. We'll just say I think, rather than, this is typical Trump land. Trump has John Barron, the mystery publicist, who he would call reporters at the Post or the New York Times and pretend to be this guy. And so I thought, okay, well, the tariffs and the Dows are down. And so I threw in Ron Vera just in case, at this point, the people who are looking at cartoons, boy, they're reading, and they know these references. And so I've never been a dumb it down person, but you also have to, be aware that not everybody is looking at the news cycle 13 hours a day either.
Right.
So I just threw in his stock price for fun.
But you are giving your viewer credit for having a lot of knowledge and a lot of intelligence. And not every artist can get away with that. When I got my first job out of college, it was at a newspaper where they were telling me, uh, you can't assume they know anything. And
Yeah. Well,
constantly talking down to their readers. And one editor dragged me into the typing room with all the women typing and asking one of the young women, can you understand this picture? And she couldn't. She couldn't make it out. And he said, you see, I'm right. But I realized that's not my audience. I need my audience to be, you know, interested in what's happening, fairly well informed, and able to put these things together. Otherwise, it's poor work, in my opinion, if you're dumbing it down.
yeah, but I think, when you and I got in the business in the 70s, I assume that's when you got in,
Yeah.
that it was just a different media landscape in 1978. There was no CNN, there was no internet. You had the big three network news programs. Um,
But
you know,
print was king.
right. Well, and if you lived in any decent sized city, you had two daily newspapers, and if you were in New York, you had seven when you were growing up, probably something like that. And
Like that. And you got your morning paper, then you got your afternoon paper. And you could get that time, you could get the New York Post in the afternoon, which was a liberal paper,
right,
run by
right,
Dorothy Schiff before
right.
she sold it to Murdoch. And a lot of people got, or they got a newspaper that nobody remembers called the World Telegram and Sun, which was also an afternoon paper, as I recall. Not a very
You know,
good
I'm related to Charles A. Dana, who was the publisher and editor of the Sun.
the first big paper in New York was the
And
Sun.
if he would have found out that I had gotten the Pulitzer Prize, who was Joe Pulitzer was his blood rival, and Charles A. Dana was a vicious anti-Semite, for the record. So I'm happy to bury that on
Uh,
behalf of the Dana family.
Jack, that's the American way. These days, it's fashionable to be an anti-Semite by blaming other people for being anti-Semitic. It's so interesting. But we'll talk about that another time. I want to get in as many, I've got 15 more minutes. I want to get as many pictures as I can. I just want to talk about this one for a second. the local cartoon, the idea of you have people who are your readers, and they really want you to talk about stuff that's happening in their community. And this is a state cartoon. Uh, I think it's fairly recent,
Yeah.
last month.
It
Well,
the way I
who's
go ahead.
drawing Harris anymore? Like, who cares about Harris? And now in California they do because she's right, because she has the capacity for huge fundraising, and she could blast away some of these people who are fascinating choices like Becerra and Porter, and Villaraigosa,
Mm-hmm. Beer
Villaraigosa,
girls. Yeah.
yeah. And I didn't even know he was running. So,
He was I think he was one of the first people to announce,
you know,
actually.
so and
This
and and Gavin Newsom is term limited, right? He can't.
right.
Yeah.
This was when I started at the Chronicle about 18 months ago or whenever it was. My editor asked me to do an illustration to go with the political column.
Hmm.
And so, or he said, "Can you do 3 cartoons a week?" And I said, "Well, if one of them's an illustration, right?" And so this is technically an illustration. Um, and sometimes I will make them, quite vague because, at some point, I mean, I got to like sleep and eat and things.
Good
But
idea.
to me, an illustration, it's a lot easier. If I said to you, Steve, I need an illustration, you'd be, well, thank God it's not a cartoon with words in it, because then I'm just gonna, that's like being on vacation for us. I mean, one of the things that I've learned, if you want to go back and talk about color for a second, this is a good illustration, literally, of that. Um, I loved Winslow Homer paintings, and Winslow Homer was really good at putting some little teeny red thing
Yeah.
in the brook trout painting or something, or the gill plate was, here's my fly fishing stuff. The gill lining was red and everything else was gray, blue, green, yellow. And so I just thought, okay, well, there's my little piece of red right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you can get just some red in there, now you could go, duotone, blue, yellow, and not, but it just needed red.
No, red is your superpower.
It is.
If you can hold off on the red until you really need to draw the eye, boom, there it is.
Mm-hmm.
And look
Now,
how tiny. Look, it can be microscopic, and it still works.
what's funny about, I've been drawing Harris for years out here, and newer in passing, and I have to say, with varying degrees of success. Um, and I don't want to be a sexist about it, but she's really, really beautiful woman, and in person, she's just like, wow, you know. And the second I saw her in person for the first time, well, I saw her on TV in 12 when she was speaking at the Democratic Convention. I turned to my son Bobby, who is a kind of a politician type himself, and I said, "Well, there's the first black woman president of the United States," and I'd never heard of her, you know. And so fast forward to her rapid ascent in California, and oh, she's just delightful in person, and she's funny. And one time I wasn't even there, and she came into my office and wrote me a note, and is a good, smart politician. And God, every day I would sit down and try to figure out how I was going to draw Senator Harris when I would do local cartoons, or Attorney General Harris when I would do local cartoons.
Tough. She's hard.
And God, it was really hard. The second she lost, I had dead on. Just like I had been staring at her for 6 months or whatever. And you're like, okay, now I've got it. And all the cartoonists around, a lot of the cartoonists would call me up and say, hey, what's the trick with Harris? And if you go in on the eyes, I'll tell you what the trick is. Um, I said her eyes look like Nike swooshes. Okay, that's not there, but like they're just, that's how you're gonna do it if there's
Yeah.
another. But
No, I need to have a more complex opinion of someone than Harris, and that was my problem with her. I just couldn't, you know, get this kind of a feeling going with Harris, even to a small degree. Anyway, everyone makes comments about his hair, but it was perfect for this because, again, two ideas that connect up that don't necessarily belong together. His incessant obsession with water pressure in showers, needing to ban certain shower heads, and then um, that which is hidden underneath that nobody wants to mention or talk about, which is constitutional crisis, which we are in right now. This is a picture from last month, the 16th, it looks like. And it's only last night that he said that he didn't agree with the oath of office. And so it's entirely it's entirely appropriate, um, and very well composed. You have white, which is also a hugely important color to master, moving this way and this way and this way, kind of an axis over here. Incidentally, for my students, Jack is looking at real fixtures. He might have this in his mind, but he also may have Googled it or gone into
buddy,
the toilet and
I
taken a
just
picture.
installed my own shower head.
All right.
That's how I'm not kidding. I just let head was just front of mine, so and mine wasn't gold either.
But,
But yeah,
but this one has to be gold. I'm going to gallop along. I love this. I love this. I don't know how many people knew about Lutnick's comment about the great future, the great glorious future for America, in which all these factories will be coming to America, and workers will be having great jobs screwing, putting little screws in things. He said this. This is the man who said that when his mother doesn't get Social Security, who cares? She'll be fine. So you just took that idea, assuming we heard that interview, which many of your readers did, and just went with it and said, this is what's really happening over here. American workers are getting the big screw from tariffs.
yeah. Again, this is a pretty simple idea for me. But I always tell people that editorial cartooning is like kind of like novel writing in that they're probably my daughter's an actual novelist, and she just got her second book picked up from Penguin Random House. And I one time I said to her, political cartoons, there's like 12 basic novel plots, and she said, "Daddy, there are 8 basic novel plots." And so what if I'm stuck, and when we're all working on deadline every day, we get stuck. And this is a classic comparison contrast idea. So little screws, opposite of little is big. What is the big screw? Now, that again, the screw in somebody is a rather common political cartoon employment. But I don't know. I like the way this looked. So I've been trying to force myself in some ways to draw simpler drawings and not like get if you look at the workers on the left, I didn't get hung up on
No,
shadows.
but it's perfect. But the thing that you're doing here is the thing that I love to do in the my dailies, which is to just get the right quote. If I can illustrate some very telling quote that popped out in the last 24 hours, I've got my piece.
Yeah,
All you have to do is put the quote down, you know. Um,
they write it for you.
like Thomas Nast, what are you going to do about it, New York Times? And then you, all right, let's discuss the issue that the New York Times is talking about. So you didn't have to get, I would have given you the whole Lutnick quote, but you expected us to be smarter than that. And we are smarter than that. And that's a very successful piece. And then again, two things together. Trump's smashingly great physical, for some reason, is something that he's very happy about, while the rest of us are on life support. And again, Jack is giving us lots of extras here. Ivermectin, bleach. The type of blood is, oh my God. Uh, the fellow is getting some gin in the process, which is a great way to go. And and Trump couldn't care less. My health is great. And here comes the Dow, and here's the tie. I mean, what is your deadline on this, Jack? How many hours from the beginning of your, assuming you did this in one day, how many hours would you say you took for this cartoon with this level of complexity?
I doubt three,
Uh-huh. Okay.
maybe two.
That's training, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, it's more a question of, I'm 3 hours behind New York,
Yeah.
and a lot of the papers. So like, I'm trying to get done by 12, 1 o'clock. Um, my syndicate's in Chicago, so I'm kind of going for that central time, 5 o'clock, so that's 2 o'clock here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I people have just been drawing cartoons all day by the time I get to it, and
Well, these
I
days
look at,
they're drawing them all night. And I can look at a
well, you are, but yeah.
but I could say, if I don't do this idea right now, by the time I wake up, 12 people will have done it already. So
and they
I
and
don't
they
want to
have.
copy them. I want to just do the first one.
Well, I was just petrified. I mean, something will happen on Sunday, and that like Adam Ziglis and every other East Coast cartoonist they're done, and you're like, okay, now I've got to think of the 13th idea that Adam Ziglis and everybody and Bram Hall,
Didn't get.
and all those guys who are great cartoonists, haven't come up with.
But
So
Matt Worker and I both on the same day did a drawing of um, Bill Barr as a frog, a bullfrog eating documents. This is years ago, and I think they were both fine, and they both were different. One was a Matt piece, and the other was a Steve piece, and
yeah.
and I think if 12 artists had the same idea, they would do them 12 different ways, reflecting their sensibility, and each one be interesting, I think.
It's really funny when you're showing these cartoons. These are not the cartoons I probably would have picked. I mean, I certainly like the first one.
Yeah.
Um, and I write, uh, and thank you for your subscription, incidentally.
I, I
My
recommend everyone to subscribe. Uh, Jack Ohman at substack.com.
Yes, and what I,
Jack, Jack, no, 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 Jack Ohman.substack.com.
boy, I
Correct.
wish I sounds good. Um,
Google Jack Ohman Substack, you'll find it.
right, but
And and you'll be able to read his essays, look at his art, and be thrilled by all these ideas. What were you going to say? I'm
well,
sorry.
I was going to say, I mean, I think this is a rather flat presentation of the idea. I do a cartoon a week for Smirconish, michaelsmirconish.com.
Mhm.
And then he shows our cartoons on Saturday on CNN, and I get texts from my cousin saying, "Oh, hey, I saw your cartoon on CNN." But like, you got to have a really simple cartoon for Smirconish,
I see.
because they show it on TV, so I'm quite mindful of that. I don't do multi-panel stuff for Smirconish. But it was pretty straightforward idea, and I mean, readers don't notice, and they just want the funny drawing of Hegseth as a pig. So
But you
whether I
didn't
do
just you didn't just draw him as a pig. You drew him as a glamorous pig. He's got eyelashes and
yeah, he's very glamorous. Yeah,
glamorous.
ask his seven wives. Yeah, he's very glamorous. Um. Anyway, so
Let's look at their tattoos.
Right. No thanks.
No.
Um, but this again is a pretty simple presentation, but it worked
Yes, and the rule of red applies here too.
very much so.
But, what are you going to do when you get the absurd headline that he has his own makeup studio put in the Pentagon? You got to do something. I haven't done it yet, but like this was definitely along the lines of what I was going to do. We're going to do one more after this, and then we're going to say goodbye with a request that we can do this again because I still have a ton of things, and and I'm glad that I haven't chosen your favorite ones because next time we can do maybe more of your favorites. Um, but this is comparison. This is a joke or an idea that is word based, uh, but not but, and it is a an idea that um, will resonate with people. So sometimes the idea that is simplest is the one that is going to make the greatest connection.
Well, you and I share a love of history, and we've talked endlessly about Franklin Roosevelt and all those old boys from back in the day who we loved, and I'm always looking for an opportunity to put FDR, Jack Kennedy, or you know Abraham Lincoln is probably almost a cartoon character for me now, and so I was that is a very writing cartoon. Okay, there you go. Um,
I wanted to end on this one because
okay.
I think it's especially brilliant. Okay, for so many reasons. Um, you you give us the idea that occurs to everyone who spends any time at all thinking about this character here and what he's doing, and that the old idea that they're rolling in their turning in their spinning in their graves, um, and but the it's got a double-barreled powerful effect. You have both these guys again in the Jack Ohman patented mini caricature bullseye. We can see exactly who they are. Uh, and then to take the torch has been passed and to be able to turn that around as you have, the past has been torched. You know, they're not in the graves, they're not spinning, they're not burning, there's no flames, they're in this comfortable living room in heaven. Um, and they're
Well, no.
and they're just making this comment, you know.
Well, these can be mawkish, and we have to kind of avoid that. But, um, you know, RFK Jr., who I had actually spent some time with 25 years ago, and I didn't find him delightful in it or anything, but I didn't find him insane. Um, I felt like this man is mentally ill.
25 years ago?
No, no, not then.
Oh,
No,
not then.
no. But I kind of, I was the guy who brought him out to Oregon to speak at the at PSU's homecoming,
Okay.
and he charged 11.5, and he was really good. And the cocktail reception, and this was when he was exactly his father's age, which was 42. I
Uh-huh.
mean, it was just scary how much he looked like him, um, and I like the guy, I mean, you could tease him a little bit and so on. And I just see this as such a tragedy where this man is trying to work out his mental illness in public, and now he's going to take a lot of people down with him. As far as the drawing, when I draw Lincoln, it's usually in sepia, just so you don't have to draw clouds around him or anything like that. And you notice that this isn't, this kind of blue wash that I like to do. And then the
Yeah.
FDR is again in the blue wash. And so that's kind of how I handle, then now people.
Yeah. Perfect. Uh, and you you just make enough space in your design for these heads. Again, they're small in the composition. Um, and I think I don't know where the eye goes first. I believe the eye goes to the RFK Jr. image because it's got red and it's got color, and it's crazy what's going on over there. Then your eye moves left and you say, "Oh my God." And then you go to the brilliant piece of writing, "The past has been torched." And it is completely 100% bullseye successful. Jack, you're leaving a lot on the table, which is good. It's a good hour we did, and with your kind permission, I'd like to schedule another one.
That'd be great.
For my
We,
kid,
we
my student, this would be golden. And for cartoonists who want to tune in, or just your fans who want to get to hear what you have to say about your work and your career in general, I think it's extremely valuable and very generous of you.
well, it's really fun as usual. I always love seeing you, and we didn't do any voices today, which is interesting.
Well,
But maybe
could you give us a little JFK before we say goodbye?
it's been delightful to be here.
Going to
Good to
proceed
see
with
you
bigger.
there. Yes. Have a good
Uh,
day.
so we'll talk soon, Jack.
Okay.
All the best.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Grateful.
Okay.